Hi, my name is Garrett Button, and this is my presentation on Leonardo da Vinci. I'm gonna take you through his early life, some of his works, his inventions, and then his legacy. So I'll just hop right in. So, Leonardo was born on April 15th in 1452 in a farmhouse outside of Anciano in Tuscany, Italy. He was actually born out of wedlock. His father was Ser Piero, and his mother was Caterina. He moved out when he was 5 with his father to uh, Vinci, Italy, and didn't receive really any formal education, learning about reading, writing, math, anything like that. But he did show a very artistic nature from a young age, so he ended up being an apprentice to Andrea del Verrocchio in Florence, Italy. And he quickly progressed. He learned a host of skills: carpentry, metalwork, drawing, painting, sculpting. And it was said that he was so good that after kind of graduating his apprenticeship with Andrea del Verrocchio, Verrocchio actually put down his own paintbrush, and it was kind of a apprentice becomes teacher moment for him. So he established his own workshop. He worked with his master for an additional 5 years, although it wasn't really required for him, and he received his first commission to create an altarpiece for a chapel in Italy in 1478. So yeah, that was his early life, and now we will move in to his works. So one of his most famous works was The Last Supper. It was painted between 1495 and 1498. The Duke of Milan commissioned the work, and he actually wanted it to be displayed on the back wall of his dining hall in one of his monasteries, which is kind of ironic because it has become such a phenomenon and such a recognizable painting. And the painting depicts the moment when Jesus informs his disciples that one of them will betray him. And Leonardo believed that each man's posture, expression, reaction, how they're portrayed should be a reflection of who that man was as a person. So you had groups of three, and each group is kind of sharing a similar reaction. I think the real beauty in this painting is seen on their faces. So Jesus has this calm demeanor. He's kind of accepted his fate, and all of his disciples are shocked. They're around him. I'm not going to go into too much detail on each one of them, but each one of them has a unique reaction based on who they were. And there are many visual paradoxes present. One example is the table is too big for the room. If like scientists have gone back and they've drawn up the dimensions of the room, and the table wouldn't have actually fit in the room, but the table is also not big enough to fit all of the disciples. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. Now I'm going to talk about Vitruvian Man, which is the a more scientific work. It's not a painting, it's a drawing, but nonetheless, it's still very famous. So it was drawn around 1490, and it's a beautiful example of when art and science intersect. Leonardo was a scientist as well as an artist, and this is an example of when his science kind of met art, and it's very beautiful. So it had 4 arms and legs, which allows the figure to have 16 possible poses. So if you think about the different combinations, like he could have the bottom 2 legs, and basically there's a bunch of different combinations that you could see in this figure. And he actually had the writing on the top had perfect human proportions. So it said things like 4 fingers equal 1 palm, 4 palms equal 1 foot, like etc. etc. It was the dimensions for the perfect man. I believe 6 palms made 1 cubit, 4 cubits made the man's height, and yeah, it was actually people speculate that it was based off the book De Architectura. Some of these names are hard to pronounce, which was a building guide written by Vitruvius. And so you have Vitruvian Man. And although the book mainly focused on architecture, it still focused on proportion. This is probably one of the most famous paintings in the world. It's the Mona Lisa. He started painting this in 1503, and it was found in his studio after he had died. No one knows who the subject is. There's speculation that it was his sister or his mother, or even one of his assistants dressed up as a woman, but no one is quite sure. Another kind of weird fact is nobody is quite sure why it is so famous. So it's extremely recognizable and it's a beautiful painting, but no one can really put their thumb on why it's so recognizable. So some speculate that it is the theft that occurred in 1911. Others speculate it was the tour of America that it took in 1603, but there is no definite answer. And another interesting fact is that it appears to be looking at the viewer no matter what angle, so you can be off to the side, and it still appears as if Mona is looking at you. So real quick, I'm going to go through his inventions, because he came up with a lot of inventions kind of before his time. So he came up with a parachute that was a pyramid structure that would slow the person's velocity as they fell. He wrote that it would allow man to throw himself from any height without suffering injury. He wrote he designed a diving suit, which would allow men to engage in underwater sabotage, so they would be able to cut holes in the bottom of the enemy's ships. Sadly, he didn't quite get to the breathing hose or the glass goggles, but we got there eventually. While working for the Duke of Milan, the same man who commissioned The Last Supper, he created the armored war machine with 36 guns. It was supposed to be driven by 8 men. And after analyzing the picture, there's an error. The gears in the front and back move in opposite directions. Some people say that that was on purpose, so that if the enemy had found it, they wouldn't be able to assemble the tank properly, which is very interesting. He also tried to invent a flying machine, much like a bird, and then also a machine gun, which none of those were developed, but a lot of these had not been developed before, and he came up with the first concepts of these. So he died May 2nd, 1519, and his legacy is incredible. He's inspired thousands of artists. His paintings are some of the most iconic in the world. He kind of, I wouldn't say coined, but revolutionized the sfumato technique, which you can see in the Mona Lisa. It's a technique of allowing tones and colors to shade gradually into each other, and so it produces a softened outline or more hazy form. You can see in the Mona Lisa. It's quite beautiful. His inventions were definitely part of his legacy. The diving suit, planes, a tank. It was all very before his time, and I think a lot of it can be summed up with what Sigmund Freud said. He said he was a man who awoke too early in the darkness, while others were all still asleep. My name is Garrett Button. Thank you for listening.